Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to pass it off to Michelle Long-Spears, who will kick off our Just Business Roundtable launch. Take it away, Michelle.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the launch of Metro Atlanta's Just Business Roundtable. My name is Michelle Long-Spears. I'm the managing co-leader of this project. We are thrilled that over 160 folks, many from our regional business community, are on the Zoom today to celebrate with us, begin to map out a way forward for the business community to address, accelerate, and achieve corporate racial equity in our region. For the past 4 years, Partnership for Southern Equity and several leading members of our regional business community have been on a journey to convene like-minded business leaders to learn together and bring awareness to the racial inequities that exist in our region and in the private sector. But we have much work yet to do, as ending hundreds of years of racism is a marathon, not a sprint, as Nathaniel likes to say. To move this work forward, we're inviting 30 new business leaders to join the roundtable by end of year. People with different perspectives from different industries and different parts of our region. I believe that the corporate community, institutions made up of people, has the ability to transform our region into a more equitable one that has business leaders equipped to shift our region towards greater justice, and one that we can be proud of for many generations to come. We planned a robust agenda and have a dynamic group of speakers for you today. As you listen to them, think about this question. What role do you play in change at your place of employment, in your neighborhood or community, with your family and friends? Actress Viola Davis recently said something that resonated with me. You can't have courage and comfort in the same room. So which room will you sit in? I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers. First up is Chris Burke. Chris is PSC's board chair and a dear friend of mine. We also have with us Cheryl Quartermeyer, who has been involved with PSC since 2015 and is a design team member for the Just Business Roundtable. We also have Chloe. Chloe is the leader of our Public Influence Committee and was also a member of the design team. Next slide, please. Jamie Buck Vance has been a wonderful board member and leader of PSC now for, I don't know, Jamie, around a decade, and has been deeply engaged and was actually one of my partners in crime when we talked about this project out in front of a Dunkin' Donuts years ago. Joey Shea is the leader of our Corporate Practice Committee and has been involved with the Just Business Roundtable Steering Committee. Josh Penny with MailChimp has been a friend of PSC for many years now, and he leads the Capacity Committee. Next slide, please. Then we have Nathaniel Smith, our leader, the founder and Chief Equity Officer of Partnership for Southern Equity, whose vision we're all bringing to life. Ryan Wilson, who serves as one of our tri-chairs, and he is the CEO of the Gathering Spot, and he's also involved with our Capacity Committee. And last, but certainly not least, we have Sterling Johnson, who is a portfolio manager for the Just Opportunity portfolio. Before I turn it over to Chris, I did want to thank our design team, who's been meeting for years now, and our steering committee, who's been meeting for close to a year, for your continued support and engagement of the Just Business Roundtable. So without further ado, Chris, you are up, my friend.
Hey, thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate this opportunity, and thank you to all of our guests who have taken time out of their day to join us today. I'm Chris Burke. I'm fortunate to be the board chair of PSC, a role I've sat in for about 3 years now. And what's been most exciting for me being both in this role, but also just being a friend of Nathaniel's is watching him grow and watching him grow this movement. And I note that I say movement, not organization. And so I could remember fondly back first hearing about Equity Atlanta. And that vision came out of two things. One, it came from Nate's deep love for his city, Atlanta. And two, after attending a Policy Link Equity Summit in New Orleans, there was this burning passion that, we have to do something in Atlanta. It was certainly, looking back now, it was certainly a much different time in Atlanta. And things have gotten both better and worse, depending on which vantage point you take. So at that point, Equity Atlanta was formed, and really it was formed out of the passion that something had to be done to make way for more people to partake in what was this new economy in our city and region. At that time, equity was a term used primarily when you were discussing refinancing your house or pulling some money out, to get an addition to the house, a deck or something added. It was not a term that was as commonly used as today. You look at today, and equity is front and center for many discussions, both personal and private, in all sectors of work. And so why? Why is this such a critical time to have this discussion? Well, I think for the past year, as we have sat home, most of us working from home in this format, really faced with tons of social unrest and the challenges both nationwide and continued challenges in our city, it's been a good time for us to take stock, to evaluate our own lives, our business, and how we move through the world and what type of city do we want Atlanta to be. Atlanta has been a place for great opportunity for many people, but yet and still, some of the residents that have been here the longest find themselves shut out. Working at Georgia Tech and being kind of at a center where we educate a lot of top tech talent, one thing we pride ourselves on is Atlanta as a city is ranked in the top 10 for tech talent. And that's evident when you look at all the new announcements that have been made for companies coming here. We have talented people. But of those people that are often touted and marketed as being the next wave of talent, there are a lot more that are locked out of that opportunity. And so what we hope to do today is welcome you to a conversation to talk about a new way forward where everybody can participate and prosper. And realistically, these are solutions that only we can bring forward. There's not enough money in government, there's not enough federal dollars or state or local dollars for that matter, that's going to get us out of this mess. The only way forward is that we have frank and honest conversation and really look for a path where we can all do better. And so with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Ryan Wilson. He's the CEO of The Gathering Spot. And Ryan will lay out what our day is going to look like. Thank you. Ryan, I'll turn it to you.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you for everyone that's joined us this afternoon. We are really excited to finally have this launch. There have been a lot of amazing conversations with a lot of amazing people over the last several months. And so to be able to share this moment with you is extremely humbling for me. I've been tasked to talk about why we are here, and to ground this conversation, I want to personally talk about why I'm here. I had a life event last year. A little over a year ago, my wife and I welcomed our first child, and my daughter's name is Cameron. So many things have changed with fatherhood, but one of the things that has changed most for me is a look into the future that I hadn't had before. I was one of those folks prior to Cameron being with us that was thinking about the next day, the next week, maybe the next month, but certainly not the next several years to come. But in having her with us, my perspective on not only her future, but this city's future has come into full perspective. And so what we're here today is to talk about our collective future. I think that we are at a very, very important point in our city's history where we are going to make fundamental decisions today that are going to impact what our city is like moving forward. As Chris outlined, the stakes are very, very high. And there are many people in our community right now that need and have been pleading for the entire community to view this conversation around equity as a collective conversation that we all need to have. And so we are here today to begin that process in earnest, to ask the corporate community to join us in partnership in a number of conversations that we believe will turn into action that ultimately, again, will decide what the future has to say about our time here in the city and on our journey through life. I'll conclude with this. Growing up here in Atlanta, there was a Margaret Mead quote that I believe everyone heard, but I think is something that definitely should be introduced for today's conversation and for the work ahead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. I think that this is the small group of thoughtful citizens, and so I look forward to working with you and with the folks that will join us on this journey to build a more equitable Atlanta. Now we will hear from the leader himself, Nathaniel Smith.
Well, thank you so much for the why we're here. I think it's very important for us to elevate that. And of course, I always want to take the time out to honor my board chair, Mr. Chris Burke, as well as the various leaders from the private sector who have chosen to become a part of the Just Business Roundtable design team initially, and now a steering committee. And so for us, we wanted to provide just a quick commercial for those who may not be aware of the Partnership for Southern Equity. We are a nonprofit organization that is focused on advancing a new agenda for racial equity and shared prosperity in the city of Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, Georgia, and the American South. For us, again, it's about advancing a racial equity agenda, understanding that one of our constant and entrenched challenges that we must face in order for us to achieve full inclusion is to be able to move beyond a time where the color of someone's skin does not dictate their life outcomes. And we've chosen this work primarily by way of focusing in 4 primary areas. Our Just Energy portfolio, which focuses on climate justice and energy equity, our Just Health portfolio, which focuses on health equity, our Just Growth portfolio, which focuses on equitable development, and last but certainly not least, our Just Opportunity portfolio, which focuses on economic inclusion, which is, of course, where the work of the Just Business Roundtable resides. Next slide. So for us, it is about not just a what for doing this work, but is also about a way. We believe that equity is a way and not just a what. And with that way, we focus on leading with race. We also focus on the importance of catalyzing relationships and really growing an ecosystem of leaders that can come together to advance our work together collectively. We ground our work in the communities of color and low wealth communities that we serve. You know, we're a strong believer that the people that are actually closest to the problem are actually closest to the solutions that we need in order to create a more inclusive and competitive region. We lead, of course, with data and research. And of course, our work is not just about transforming systems. Of course, we focus on that, but also transforming people. Next slide. So when we say equity, and again, we wanted to use this as an opportunity to really qualify our work so we could make sure that we have level setting the conversation. When we talk about equity, what we're basically talking about is just and fair inclusion. It's about creating a society where all people can participate and prosper. Many of you have seen the photo of the boxes with the equity and equality differentiation. A lot of times, sometimes people use the term equity and equality synonymously. There is a difference. And so we are using this as an example of the differences between equity and equality. One photo where people are standing on the same box. And of course, that affects, you know, the vision of people of different sizes, and equity, you know, facilitating a box where people can see the game. But in the world where PSC is working with our partners, as well as many of you on the call, and hopefully individuals that will embrace this challenge and opportunity that the Just Business Roundtable is working to realize, there's also reality. We are living in a time where our most challenged don't even have solid ground to stand on. And certain elements of our community have such an unfair advantage that it minimizes the opportunity for all people to have a chance to benefit and participate in the game of life. And so this is the primary frame around the work that we're doing. Next slide. So I want to also just talk a little bit about the Just Business Roundtable. The vision of the roundtable is about creating an equitable economy that allows Black and historically disinvested communities of color to contribute and thrive in Metro Atlanta. Today, we do not have an economy that is leveraging all of our talent and facilitating the cultivation of our talent, which in the end is minimizing our ability to be competitive. And it is also minimizing our ability to create the type of region that we want. And so we want to create an economy that is not only competitive, but also inclusive, because we believe that the future is dependent upon our ability to leverage all of the talent and position all of our stakeholders to be involved and benefit from our economy. And so as a result of that vision, and the multiple years of work we've been able to do with many of our friends in the private sector, we have elevated and realized this new mission around what we're calling the Just Business Roundtable. You know, we want the Just Business Roundtable to be a platform for businesses to learn and hold honest dialogue around systemic racism in the corporate sector, examine and improve internal policies and practices, and affect racial economic disparities, and to shape public policies towards a race-conscious, equitable approach to growing Metro Atlanta's economy. What does that mean? What that means is, as a third generation native of Atlanta, I know that in order for the city in our region to move forward towards a more racially just society, that the business community must be an active and engaged partner in realizing this vision. Atlanta has a history of the business community playing a critical role in working to make Atlanta different than many of the other cities in the South. And one of the things that we have to be conscious of at this critical time, a time of uncertainty, is that for the business community, as it relates to racial equity, we have to move from marketing to meaning. We have to begin the process of working together to realize the type of world that, again, can be competitive and create a great economy for our city and region, but not at the expense of our most vulnerable. And that we have to move forward to look at all people as an asset and no one as a liability. And so our strategic priorities for the Just Business Roundtable are to work to influence public discourse, to, you know, and to elevate conversations and to engage around key issues that affect not just our ability to be competitive, but also our ability to be a more racially just region, to work to influence corporate practice and to look for opportunities inside of our member organizations to think more strategically about creating racial equity within their respective organizations. We also want to work to influence public policy around issues that, again, work at the intersection of racial equity and corporate competitiveness. And I believe that there are many in our region, and we've talked about them at great length around the Just Business Roundtable table. And of course, invest in roundtable capacity. The roundtable is not just about moving an agenda forward. Again, it's not just about transforming systems, but it's also about transforming people and building a culture of trust. Through this process, we hope that we will be able to work to build the next generation and the current generation of business leaders that we will need, that are able to stand on the shoulders of Andrew Young and Ivan Allen and Maynard Jackson and other key leaders who saw the importance of Atlanta being an inclusive society, a conclusive community, and inclusive economy. And so we want to work to continue to grow the capacity of all of our members who are around the table. Next slide. So I'll just talk quickly about this. This is just a breakdown of the Just Business Roundtable structure. As I said before, the Just Business Roundtable is an initiative of the Just Opportunity Portfolio, which is led by Sadeh Batru in our Just Opportunity Portfolio. We have 3 current tri-chairs who have offered to work with us to help to advance this agenda. And we have 3 committees, of course: corporate practice, capacity, and public influence. And these are the key leaders that are a part of those various committees. Next slide. So now I am going to pass the panel over to Sterling Johnson, who serves as Partnership for Southern Equity's manager of our Just Opportunity portfolio, to have a dialogue and a discussion with the chairs of the various committees of the Just Business Roundtable. Take it away, Sterling.
Thank you, Nathaniel, and thank you everyone for joining us today. In the spirit of wanting to start this collective discussion, we found it imperative to have space for our committee leaders today to discuss a little bit of their experience, one, in entering into the space with the JBR, and knowing a little bit about them and their commitments and where they saw value in participating in this process, and then also thinking around where this work might be going in the future. As illustrated, we have 3 committees currently: our Public Influence Committee, our Capacity Committee, and our Corporate Practice Committee as well. And I'm going to briefly allow our panelists as well as our committee leads to introduce themselves. And so to start us off, Joey, I'll kick it over to you, and then we'll start off with questions after you all do introductions and talk a little bit about your committee and why you chose to participate in that committee specifically.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Joey Shea. I work for Interface. We are a flooring company that's trying to reverse global warming with carbon negative products, but really we're a flooring company. And I've known PSC for a number of years. I'm really, really proud to be here helping to facilitate this conversation with a really fantastic group of people on my committee. I look forward to sharing some of their work.
Great. Thank you, Joey. Chloe, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe Weigl. I'm a designer at Alta Planning and Design, and I am the chair of the Public Influence Committee. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. And last but not least, Josh, do you want to follow us up?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Penny. I work at MailChimp, and I'm honored to chair the Capacity Committee, which gets to think about membership for the Just Business Roundtable. Longtime friend of PSE, and glad to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you all again for joining us today and your commitment to work with the JBR. And let's just start there a little bit about you all's experience as leaders, right, in this space, and why you found it important to be aligned with a movement like the JBR, and where you really see its importance in supporting this type of work. So Josh, because you went last with us, we'll start off first with you this time.
Sure, happy to. I think what we've seen in terms of corporate racial equity work, or how businesses are starting to think about racial equity, is that a couple of things are happening. One, a lot of companies are signing on to some larger efforts, and usually those conversations are happening at the CEO level. Internally, we see a lot of companies are hiring their first diversity, equity, inclusion staff. And I think that there's there's a lot of opportunity in that gap. And what I saw with the Just Business Roundtable was a chance to be around peers who are trying to think about how do we actually execute on some of these strategies to achieve racial equity, and as a space for innovation, right? I think, this is a place where there's lots of learning to do, lots of testing about and figuring out what works. A lot of stuff we know works, right? Some things we don't want to admit works because it's the hard thing to do, right? But I think there's tons of room to test out new ideas here.
Awesome. We'll go in reverse order. So Chloe.
Sure. Well, I really was in a space where I wanted to contribute to promoting racial equity in some way. And when the opportunity presented itself to join the JBR and to learn about the JBR, I got so excited, because business is such an impactful part of our world and our region and our lives. And then you combine that with PSC, who's doing wonderful work in everything that we need to be focusing on. I just have no doubt in my mind that this was an amazing marriage of ideas and initiatives. And I know that under the leadership and guidance of PSC, we're going to be able to do some great work in our region.
Awesome. Awesome. And Joey?
Yeah, for me, the reason that I brought up our kind of environmental work at my company is that I think it's important that people understand we see ourselves as a purpose-driven enterprise. And we have a founder who passed away in 2011, Ray Anderson, who used to say that business is the only institution on the planet capable, because it was the only one large enough to take on the environmental challenges at scale that we face. And I think we are nibbling around the edges of recognizing internally as a company that all the kind of environmental sustainability solutions in the world are not going to hold on for very long if we don't do a better job globally of being a more equitable and just society. And I have felt strongly about that, and I've had many conversations with mentors, people on this call, friends for years about it. And I truly and fundamentally believe that business needs to take a leadership role because we have so much capacity for influence and impact, whether we're doing it intentionally or not. And I'm really honored and proud to see how much energy has come from the member groups already, and the kind of deep and vulnerable thoughts and conversations that we've had, which I think gives me a lot of optimism.
Amazing. So I'm going to throw this one out to the group and allow anyone who wants to jump in first to respond. But, you all referenced at different points, different challenges that are facing our economy and our world today, that you really saw business as being a perfect catalyst to respond to some of those issues. What do you see right now from your perspective as the biggest challenge to racial equity in the private sector today?
Okay, I've been thinking about this one, so I'll give you all a minute, Josh and Chloe. It's maybe a little bit unfair, but I think that for me, that the answer could be couched as business as usual. There is just a huge amount of momentum going one direction. And as with the journey around equity and more kind of just operations and just business models, I think people find out all along the way how many little choices need to be at least reviewed, if not completely changed. And that amount of, again, intentionality of purpose can be really hard because it's so kind of comprehensive. And so I think that just the standard operating procedure that everybody is used to for one way or another, that we have proven to work on certain kind of metrics of success, is really, really hard to get away from. And fundamentally, it's that we need to match our will and our ambition to the kind of practice of making all those little changes, because otherwise, no matter how heartfelt it is, we're going to end up with really impressive window dressing, and we're going to be fooling everybody, customers, consumers, investors, and ourselves, into thinking that we've made real changes. And obviously that's kind of skewed toward the corporate practice, maybe, and policy changes. That's perspective I'm kind of representing, and so that's what makes me think about is just business as usual, and all those things that we're used to doing that we know we need to change.
Josh, Chloe, would you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Joey. The other thing that comes to mind for me is that racial equity work requires companies and businesses and leaders to rethink our values. And it's easy to agree that the world should be more just. It's easy to agree that we should have racial equity. But we also have to look at some of the values that govern how we do business. And for instance, thinking about long-term impact of our companies and our businesses on the communities that we have versus short-term needs, right? Quarterly earnings, annual goals, right? What I think is gonna be required on behalf of all business leaders is courage to keep going and recognize that this is long work. And it doesn't mean that progress can't be made anytime soon, but I say that to mean that there needs to be more courage in the business community to keep going when there isn't an easy solution or there isn't a straightforward way through this.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. And Chloe, what are your thoughts?
I mean, both Josh and Joey, you said it great. I mean, I agree with y'all. I would say, yeah, being accountable, we all, I think, have this common interest and desire and need to promote racial equity, but how are we going to do it? And we can say all day long that we're going to, but we need to commit to the actions to be able to do that. I think courage was a great way to say it. And we all need to find that within our communities, within our businesses, and keep going forward with that.
Awesome. So Chloe, I'm going to come to you next on the next question first. Of each of the strategic priorities of each of the committee areas that were identified, each of you selected the committee you wanted to be affiliated with and then to step into that leadership role. What is it about the committee that you're affiliated with that really appealed to you in your position within your organization and where you really saw the greatest opportunity for change?
Well, a couple of keywords really stuck out at me, and that would be policy and community. I really have a big drive to work on those larger issues and how we can connect with government. It involves government and it involves business and the community all together. And it's big issues to tackle, and but that excites me. Thinking about how we can work towards these big goals, whether it means promoting some sort of policy change or just really figuring out how we can connect corporations to the individuals that need to be served. We have a lot of great ideas going in the Public Influence Committee about how to do these things. We're still really narrowing down the ideas, still figuring out actionable items, but I'm really excited about the direction that we're headed in.
Awesome. Joey?
Yeah, excuse me. So I feel very, very fortunate to work for a company that's supporting me, being part of these conversations and thinking deeply about how we're going to integrate some of it internally. And Christine Needles, who is on the call, is a colleague of mine, really leading our internal efforts. And for us, I think we have a tradition at Interface of setting really big, ambitious, audacious goals and being really committed to making progress before we allow ourselves to talk about it. And so for me, being part of a corporate practice thought community and challenging ourselves to really be introspective about what we were doing maybe well and maybe more likely what we weren't paying attention to and therefore probably not doing well, is a necessary step for us to basically have permission, in my opinion, to go out and potentially support and be part of a public influence campaign, or to be kind of an evangelist for this work. Because I think, frankly, and I'm sure that everybody at my company agrees, we really don't have much credibility in this space right now. And so we need to start reflecting internally and be this model before we can do this model, before we're allowed to say and talk about it. And it was that kind of theory of change that really guided what has now become a 25 plus year of kind of sustainability leadership. But it needs to integrate and center racial equity and justice of all sorts in a much more clear way. And we've got to do that in here first.
Awesome. And I'll throw it to you next, Josh, to wrap us up, and then we will pass the agenda back on to our scheduled next item as well.
Sure. So I chair the capacity committee, and we're the committee tasked with thinking about how to get people into the Just Business Roundtable and to make sure that they have a really worthwhile experience. And for us, that means that there's a space where they're challenged, they're learning, they are progressing in their journey on racial equity. And so naturally, as someone who works in corporate social responsibility, one of our superpowers is our Rolodex and our ability. Do people know what Rolodexes are anymore? Or our ability to, our external relations and relationship building. And so I wanted to contribute in that way. It's a great opportunity to really think about what the roundtable can be, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. and really think about like what sort of infrastructure we need to make that happen.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank all three of you for your perspectives, for your insight, and for your leadership, right, in this space that we've heard, and it's been echoed over and over again, the need for courage from our corporate community, and you all embody that by stepping up in this moment and responding to the challenges that are before us as a city of Atlanta. And we're welcoming, of course, out of this process, more partners who will be able to work with us and start to co-design and create really the change that we want to see. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Nathaniel for the next part of our agenda.
So as I, have said before that, we are living in very uncertain times, times that will require all of us to elevate ourselves in ways that we never thought we had to in order to get over the challenges that we're facing. Issues around our economy, our climate, and our social issues are affected in so many ways by the challenges that we face around America's greatest sin, which is structural racism. And in many ways, many of the structures and systems that affect not only the people that have, but in a more disproportionate way, the people who are on the outside looking in, that want to be a part of the change that we see in community and even more so benefit from it, are left out because of the issues that we face around structural racism. And I would say that even more so now, and this is what keeps me hopeful, is that a lot of research, a lot of data, a lot of other both quantitative and qualitative data, whether it be from the from some of our greatest minds like the Federal Reserve Bank or the World Economic Forum or other, consulting firms, are beginning to understand clearly that the growth of our community is tied to our ability to allow folks who are left behind, our ability to allow them to be a part of the economy that we are working to grow. That inequality, the gulf between the people that are working really hard and the ones that are doing pretty good, influences a community's ability to maintain its growth and maintain its competitiveness. So even more now than ever before, we understand now that doing good and doing well are linked. It is now time, in my opinion, for us to not only research it and think about ways and pontificate about ways that we can work together. Now it is time for us to do it, to begin the process of coming together and reaching towards that beloved community that Dr. King so eloquently talked about, not just because it is the right thing to do. There is a moral imperative associated with this work, and we cannot lose sight of that. But if we continue as a corporate community to believe that we will be able to outsource or track from out of town all of the talent that we need to remain competitive, when a lot of the talent that we have access to are not positioned in the way to fully contribute, then we will be fighting a competitiveness battle with one arm tied behind our backs. We must begin to understand that all of our residents are an asset, and we must find a way to work together. So this is an invitation as well as a charge to the business community in particular, to become a part of the Just Business Roundtable, to become a part of history, and even more so to choose the path of equity, which in our opinion is not only a destination, but a journey as well. So thank you again. And now I will pass it off to our other tri-chairs, our other two chairs of the Just Business Roundtable, Jamie Buck Vance and Cheryl Quartermeyer, to talk a little bit about their own journeys and really help us close this out. And they'll work to help us to close this out as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. This has been something I know I've personally been looking forward to for a long time. But I am Cheryl Courtmeyer, and I'm Executive Director of the Corporate Volunteer Council of Atlanta, otherwise known as the CVC. And it's my pleasure to serve as a tri-chair of the Just Business Roundtable alongside Jamie Buck-Vance and Ryan Wilson. And while I've known Nathaniel for many years, I first became involved with the Partnership for Southern Equity in 2014 when Jamie arranged for Nathaniel to present the Metro Atlanta Equity Atlas to the CVC membership. Our members were totally wowed by the wealth of data offered by PSC that could help them better focus their work and where they were investing dollars and volunteer hours. And then again in 2018, I joined the PSC team for the Policy Link Equity Summit in Chicago as part of the Atlanta delegation. Now, I will tell you, I've been passionate about equity for years, but attending this conference was a real turning point for me. I returned to Atlanta, recommitted to helping others understand the corporate role in economic inclusion and equity, both of which are essential to the future success of the city. Now, through the Just Business Roundtable, I'm delighted that I can continue this work alongside others who are just as passionate as I am about learning and holding an honest dialogue about systemic racism in the corporate sector, about examining and improving upon corporate policies and practices that affect racial economic disparities, and also helping to shape public policies toward an equitable approach to growing metropolitan Atlanta's economy. So we're really glad that you're with us today and that you've taken this first step to learn more. And I'm going to pass it over to Jamie to share a little bit about her perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. And thank you everyone for being with us today. This has been a long time coming, and I think it just couldn't be more timely than it is right now. I mean, who would have thought when we were launching this that it would be a week after the trial verdict, and it just seems even more heavy and important than it ever has. So I'd like to thank, first of all, my friend Nathaniel for bringing me into this journey. We met in Leadership Atlanta in 2009, and when he started sharing his idea for Partnership for Southern Equity, I was immediately just drawn to this needs to happen. And once you see, you can't unsee. Once you've seen the inequities and you see the statistics, and you see, most importantly, our fellow Atlantans and neighbors being left behind, you can't ever go back. And so I feel like it's really a time of reckoning, and it's an opportunity for all of the companies, and thank you for all of your bravery for being part of this, but all the companies to really stand on the right side of history. Companies do have the power, and especially collectively have the power to make huge social change. I've seen it happen. I've seen it with sustainability. And, I think equity is, definitely, it's only going to become more important as we move forward. So moving forward, you all are going to be, from a next step standpoint, you'll be receiving information from Partnership for Southern Equity on ways that you can learn more about not only the programs and the events coming up to get involved, but also how to apply to be part of the Just Business Roundtable, which will include information on how to join, cost structure. But for right now, we just wanted to invite all of you into the conversation and make sure that you all know that this is work that this organization has been focused on far before it was in the news headlines. It's something that has been, really a focus and the sole focus of the Partnership for Southern Equity since it was formed. And with that, I would love to turn it over to Andre, who is going to lead us in a Q&A so we can answer all of your questions. But again, I'd like to thank the steering committee, the design committee, the board, and also Michelle Long, who's really helped lead us through this process. So thank you to all of you. And with that, Andre, I'm going to let you take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrew Legister, the Communications Catalyst for the Partnership with Southern Equity. And we have 3 questions here from the audience. The first question is a long question, and it's the multiple parts that all tie into each other, so I'll do my best. How can we tie policy change with also changing the hearts and minds? What does building a culture of trust look like? How do we acknowledge that the Atlanta way hasn't centered the most marginalized folks? I worry that racial equity is just becoming the newest buzzword. Businesses put it on their website and hire 1 to 2 more brown and Black people, and their improved corporate social responsibility reputation improves their financial bottom line. But what is the actual impact on racial inequities? What measures are being tracked? And this is very important. How are those measures determined and by whom?
So let me first and foremost say thank you for that question. And I wish I had a tight and clean answer. But what I will say is that the ability for the Partnership for Southern Equity to convene the Just Business Roundtable, in my opinion, is an example of what is possible as it relates to advancing a racial equity agenda. You know, it's not just about the destination, and I said that before, but it's also about the journey. And not just that there is a table, right? But who is around the table and who is leading the table, all influences what the outcomes of activity will be. One of the other things that we worked on to make this effort different, or at least be in a position to be successful, is that we spent over a year before we even invited steering committee members to really begin to develop the trust. One of the kind of definitions, ways that we define the Partnership for Southern Equity is that we consider ourselves relationship accelerators. And what we mean by that is that we work hard to create safe spaces for individuals who are beginning the equity journey to begin to come together and reach and be uncomfortable, and to begin to have real conversations about what does success look like and what do we need to do as a collective. And because we spent that time on the front end, again, that is the reason why I would say that the Just Business Roundtable is different. And I would again say that, you know, measuring success is critical and important, but how you measure success and who defines what those success measures are is just as important. And so we cannot get caught up in this idea of checking off the boxes in terms of how we define success. Yes, it will be great to get some policies passed that will help to create a more connective and inclusive region and competitive region. Yes, it would be great to get some internal policies passed in these companies that will create opportunities for our most vulnerable to have a chance to be included in hiring opportunities in these businesses. It'll be great for us to train and educate as many people as we can in the private sector. But if we can work to transform the hearts of people as well, if we can begin to encourage, you know, and create the spaces that we need for people to be more courageous, and if we're able to not only work through the Just Business Roundtable to close the economic and income mobility gap that we face in this region, or the income inequality gap that we face in this region, if we're able to close the courage gap in this region, which in my opinion is the most detrimental gap to and barrier to us realizing racial equity, the courage gap, then we will be in a position to make the type of changes that I believe the Just Business Roundtable can realize. But I saw Joey's hand, but that is my initial thoughts. Joy.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind, I think one of the things that we often get caught up in, and there's good reason because there's not good models or history of it, is exactly this question: tactically, what do we need to do or what can change? I think, unfortunately, one of the major reasons why that becomes such a hard question to answer is because our actual deficit is way upstream of that. So it's a courage gap, and it's an ambition gap. Business should not be looking to be better represented to their community. They shouldn't be looking to have consumers from all stripes be able to buy their stuff. It should be the ambition of business to change society to be closer to what we want. It should be the ambition of members of communities like this to build up and hold up Atlanta as the Atlanta way becoming something that means everybody wins and everybody wins more. And that everybody is mutually supportive, and that ambition, if we can elevate that to the appropriate level, which is about achieving not a what, right, but continuing to journey along a spectrum of equity and justice in economic and interchange and in kind of corporate action, well, then the tactics become obvious. The idea of representation at a given table goes away because, of course, we need everybody's idea. And of course, we need everybody's participation. And so then I think when you have that level of ambition, those things must kind of rise up to meet it.
And Joe, you make a great point, because that was actually the next question that I was going to add, that was posed by our interim health director, Arlene Parker Goldson. She asked, how will business leaders begin to make the business case for equity? And I think you started to touch in on that, but I want to give any of our other panelists the opportunity to answer that question. How can business leaders and businesses, the community, begin to make the business case for equity?
So I'll start. Quick commercial. Go to PSC's website and download Growing the Future, the Case for Economic Inclusion in Metro Atlanta. That's a good place to start in terms of understanding what the business case is. You'll also find the principles of economic inclusion that we have lifted up through our Just Opportunity Circle. And also I would encourage you to check out the W.K. Kellogg Foundation's document, The Business Case for Racial Equity, which is another great report that I would encourage you to check out. But for me, it boils down to competitiveness. How in the world can our economy remain competitive when such a large part of our community is being left behind because of structural injustice? It just does not compute. And so again, we have to make sure that all people are positioned to participate and compete and provide their innovative ideas. And if not, we're not going to be in a position to be competitive. But for the rest of the chairs and other people on the call representing JBR and PSC, any thoughts about that?
I'll jump in really quickly just to double back on that. I think a lot of what we're hearing today, and really what centers in this thought, is around reshaping our value propositions, right? About what inclusion is, what is the value of this inclusion, what's the value of our community, right? That we see this as how it currently exists as a lot of transactional relationships that happen solely because they want to, push a product or build kind of a profit margin. But really starting to rethink how we value the people within our communities being the core of the way that we relate to them. I think it's the core of rethinking this. When we start thinking about, instead of it being a zero-sum game, right, that the more that we understand that as other sectors of our economy are better positioned to participate, then we have an economy that's more robust, right? There are more buyers and sellers within our economy. There are more people who can invest. There are more people who can own businesses or start businesses, right? That there's a different type of mindset that we really have to get past this kind of traditional dog eat dog, zero-sum game of business to understand that there's a little bit more there that we haven't historically explored as well.
In the essence of time, we'll wrap this up. This last question. Are there a list of actions that you would recommend similarly for businesses to consider when tackling climate change as a business?
Joy, did you want to take that one? I can, but I don't want to talk too much. Joy?
Why are you making me talk too much then? Oh, Henry, I have a lot of thoughts on this, my man. I think that the story, our story started with this deep commitment to neutrality. And we've grown and learned a lot since then, and we've elevated our ambition since then. But I can tell you, really doing your homework on trying not to do damage makes a lot of the next steps a lot easier. And I think that there's some logic there that probably fits into a racial equity lens as well. But if you are not intentional at every step in every possible area of reducing the harm that you're responsible for, and being as kind of broad and aggressive about defining that harm so that you're doing the most that you could possibly do, then it's really hard to become restorative. And that's what we need business to shoot for when it comes to climate. And that's what we need business to shoot for when it comes to inequities, racial or otherwise, because we are an engine of that inequity around the world. No matter how much we want to talk about job creation and bringing income to people. So I think from a philosophical level, that's it. At a more tactical level, which I know your question, because you get that, is a little bit more in that line. I think I'll have to look some stuff up or kind of think about how to share some more resources directly with you. I don't want to take more time noodling on that out loud.
Yeah, and I'll just say, as you as a corporation began to kind of transition into a company, hopefully most companies are thinking about how can you become more and more carbon neutral. How are you finding opportunities to use it as an economic inclusion accelerator for low wealth communities and communities of color? You know, when you begin to look at solar, when you begin to look at weatherizing and making your buildings more energy efficient, are you inclusive of a more of a workforce that consists of Black and historically disinvested communities of color? Are you investing in smaller businesses that are owned by Black businesses, Black people, or historically disinvested communities of color to do the work? Are you following, for example, the City of Atlanta's watershed management, green infrastructure bond, that will hopefully provide resources to, encourage more green infrastructure in the city. But for example, PSC is working to create a local hiring approach around that. Are you supporting that bond and other policies that will encourage more local hiring opportunities in the city of Atlanta? So there are many, many, many ways that you can leverage the influence of the private sector through this conversation around climate, but it has to go beyond carbon. The conversation has to go beyond carbon neutrality if you want to get to equity. And as I always say, I always ask the question, can a community really be sustainable or resilient if it is not just? I don't believe that is possible. And I believe that the business community, again, through the climate conversation and remediation conversation, has an opportunity to show that.
Outstanding. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, attendees, for your questions. Thank you, panelists, for answering these questions. And if there are any more questions or concerns, or you just want to drop us a line at the Just Business Roundtable, feel free to do so at Just Business Roundtable at psequity.org. And also follow us online through our social media channels, or for Partnership for Southern Equity. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're pretty much everywhere. So, just stay tuned for more information. And as Jamie said, that you will receive more information about joining the Just Business Roundtable, and we will continue to keep everything top of mind. So thank you all for joining us today. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and onward towards equity. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great day, everybody.
You too.